welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're peeling back the layers on one of the most foundational companies in American history, Consolidated Edison, or just Con Ed.
Right.
You sent us a stack of sources detailing this massive energy provider, and what we found goes far beyond just, utility bills.
Oh, much further.
This is a story of explosive history, both literally and figuratively. We're talking nearly 200 years of operation, an infrastructure so vast it connects Thomas Edison, Tammany Hall, and the world's largest steam system.
Our mission today is to really synthesize the complexity of Con Ed. I mean, we are looking at an enterprise with over $70 billion in assets, according to 2024 data.
$70 billion.
And it holds this singular, essential, and let's be honest, often deeply controversial role in the New York metropolitan area. So we're going to trace its journey from a 19th century gaslight company to a 21st century energy distributor. We'll highlight the staggering scale of its systems, so much of which is hidden, and the accountability challenges that, inevitably come with powering nearly 9 million people.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with a history lesson that predates the Civil War, because the story of this utility is it's completely tangled up with the physical and political growth of New York City itself.
Absolutely. The lineage here is extraordinarily long, and the earliest corporate predecessor of Con Ed wasn't even about electricity.
No, it was about light, gaslight.
Exactly. Light. That company was called the New York Gaslight Company, and it was incorporated by the 46th New York State Legislature way back on March 23, 1823. That's the starting point.
The move from, oil lamps and candles to gaslight must have been a massive leap forward for a city. I mean, revolutionary technology for the time.
It was completely transformative, and what gave this new company its huge early value wasn't just the tech, it was the politics.
Of course.
On May 12, 1823, the New York Gaslight Company received the exclusive right, the franchise, to lay gas pipes south of Grand Street.
Exclusive. So, monopoly.
A monopoly. In a rapidly growing city, that kind of control over infrastructure in the most valuable commercial district, that was the single most vital piece of the puzzle. It completely insulated them from competition and guaranteed a revenue stream.
And the stability of that revenue must have been obvious right away, because just a year later, 1824, this little company was listed on the New York Stock Exchange.
It was. And this is where the historical significance really lands for you, the listener. That listing in 1824, it means that Con Ed's earliest ancestor holds the record as the longest continuously listed stock on the NYSE.
That's incredible.
Think about all the economic upheavals, the wars, the depressions, the regulatory changes since 1824. The fundamental necessity of utilities, once you get that strong government franchise, has kept that stock listed for 2 full centuries.
That remarkable duration, it doesn't just speak to business savvy, but to political skill. Because building anything in 19th century New York wasn't really an engineering problem, was it?
No, it was a political negotiation. It required being completely immersed in the system, and that system was Tammany Hall. Right.
In the early to mid-19th century, if you wanted to expand any major business, you needed the approval of the Board of Aldermen. They granted the street franchises. By the time we get to the Gilded Age, Tammany Hall controlled the board, and by extension, they controlled who got to lay pipes and wires.
And the sources show that the political machine didn't just approve these businesses, they were directly involved.
Oh, they were fully integrated. We see this most clearly during the reign of William Boss Tweed. By 1871, Tweed himself, the infamous boss of Tammany Hall, he was documented as being a member of the board of the Harlem Gaslight Company,
which was a precursor to Con Ed.
One of the many precursors. This early history just shows you that the utility was born from this fusion of state-sanctioned monopoly and raw political patronage. I mean, it's the original blueprint for how large American corporations operated in cities.
So Tammany Hall provides the political consolidation, and then the technological consolidation happens as these gas companies start merging together. Exactly. On November 10th, 1884, 6 of the big gas companies, including the original New York Gaslight and the Harlem Gaslight Company, they all merged to form the Consolidated Gas Company of New York.
Makes sense. Consolidation.
It was all about efficiency, streamlining operations across a city that was just exploding in size. But the future of light wasn't gas anymore, it was electricity.
And this is where the name Edison becomes part of the corporate DNA, even though he started out as a competitor.
That's right. Consolidated Gas saw where things were headed, and they bought the Edison Illuminating Company in 1901, Thomas Edison had founded that company in 1880, pioneering DC power.
And his initial system was tiny, right?
Incredibly small.
Yeah.
When he started, his system supplied electricity to just 59 customers in a single square mile of Lower Manhattan. So the acquisition was a brilliant strategic move by the gas company to just dominate the emerging electric market.
We always talk about the war of currents, Edison's DC versus Westinghouse's AC. This suggests that after the war was technically won by AC, the real battle was just who controlled the infrastructure itself.
That's a really sharp insight. The technical battle may have favored AC for transmission, but the corporate battle was all about market share and who owned the wires. And after that period of intense competition, you had over 30 companies distributing electricity in the region. But by 1920, Consolidated Gas's electricity arm, which was then called the New York Edison Company, had just used its financial power and its existing infrastructure base to crush the competition.
So they're the Consolidated Gas Company, but their main product is clearly electricity.
How long did it take for the corporate name to catch up?
Decades. Which, it says a lot about corporate inertia. It wasn't until 1936 that the name finally changed.
It prompted it.
The company's own annual report. It revealed this stark fact. Approximately 75% of their gross operating revenue came from electricity. They were basically an electric company pretending to be a gas company.
So the realization that 3/4 of their income came from electrons, not methane, finally forced the change. Correct. On March 16, 1936, the stockholders voted to change the name to Consolidated Edison Company of New York, Inc. It just reflects that major operational shift from just light and heat to being an integrated energy utility.
Okay, let's fast forward to the modern era. The whole utility industry goes through deregulation. How did Con Ed adapt its structure for that?
The structure changed fundamentally in the late 90s. After deregulation in New York State, Consolidated Edison, Inc. was formed on January 1st, 1998. It became a holding company.
Which is a pretty typical post-deregulation move.
It is. This parent structure lets the main company own the regulated utilities, but also potentially some non-regulated energy services. It insulates the core utility from non-utility risks and allows for, more diversified shareholder returns.
So what are the key subsidiaries that are actually managing the services we all use today?
It's a tiered structure. The heart of it is the Consolidated Edison Company of New York, Inc., or CECONY. That's the regulated utility for electric and gas in NYC and Westchester, and importantly, that unique steam service in Manhattan. Then, in 1998, they acquired Orange and Rockland Utilities, Inc. That's another regulated utility serving a big 1,300 square mile area in southeastern New York and northern New Jersey.
And the third piece?
The third piece is Con Edison Transmission, Inc. That part focuses on the big stuff high voltage electric and natural gas transmission projects. They're the literal bridges between the power sources and the service area.
So when we look at the money, specifically for the regulated utility, what defines their business today?
Well, using 2015 data, the hierarchy is crystal clear. Electricity is the engine. Over 70%, 70.35% of their sales revenue came from electric service.
Wow.
Gas was the next biggest chunk at about 13.6%, and that unique Manhattan steam system accounted for about 5%. So while we talk about the history of gas and the uniqueness of steam, the economic reality is that Con is overwhelmingly an electric company.
That sets us up perfectly for part two, because we absolutely have to talk about that grid.
Yep.
The scale of this infrastructure, most of it hidden right under our feet, is just immense.
What's fascinating here is the sheer infrastructure scale, particularly how much of it is hidden from view. It makes the maintenance and the complexity just exponential compared to overhead systems. We're talking about engineering marvels that span thousands and thousands of miles, operating in the most demanding urban environment on Earth.
Let's start with that electrical network, the subterranean web that's responsible for that 70% revenue figure. Those mileage numbers in the sources were astonishing.
They really defy easy visualization. The Con Ed system includes a staggering 93,000 miles of underground cable.
93,000 miles.
To give you some perspective, that's enough insulated copper and steel cable to wrap around the entire Earth 3.6 times.
So why is managing 93,000 miles of underground cable so much more challenging than, say, overhead lines in a suburb?
Oh, the complexity is multidimensional. First, just access. Maintenance means tearing up streets, navigating subway tunnels, working around 1,000 other pipes. It's a logistical nightmare. Second is heat. With overhead lines, heat just radiates away. But underground, all that heat from the electricity is trapped. It requires specialized conduits and cooling techniques to stop the cables from literally melting down.
And I imagine water is a constant enemy.
A constant, ongoing battle in a coastal city. Even the slightest damage to cable insulation from construction or just the ground shifting allows water in. That leads to shorts and eventual failure. The sheer density of it all requires this incredibly complex, real-time computerized mapping just to keep track of everything. It's one of the most technologically challenging grids in the world to operate.
And that's just the stuff we can't see. They still have a massive network of traditional overhead wires.
They do, mostly in the less dense areas like Westchester and parts of the outer boroughs. The system is complemented by nearly 36,000 miles of overhead electric wires.
36,000.
That's enough to run a cable between New York and Los Angeles 13 times. It's the combination of the dense underground network and the sprawling overhead one that makes the scale so hard to grasp.
And to bring power in from outside sources, which they rely on heavily now, they need extremely high transmission voltages.
Right. High voltages are key to minimizing energy loss over long distances. Con's system uses 138 kilovolts, 345 kV, and even 500 kV transmission lines. Those 345 and 500 kV corridors are the critical arteries for importing bulk power into the city.
And since they became primarily a distributor, not a generator, those external connections are absolutely vital. They have to work.
They are the lifelines. Con Ed has two major 345 kV interconnections upstate. Those are the key access points for regional power markets, and that includes the ability to import hydroelectric power from Hydro-Quebec in Canada.
And they're connected to their neighbors, too.
Yep, they have a 345 kV connection with PSE&G in New Jersey and also with Long Island. That facilitates crucial power transfers during, heat waves or local generation failures.
Are there any major future projects they're anticipating to shore up that supply?
The sources highlight two key connections. There's a planned, more direct 345 kV connection to New Jersey via the Branchburg-Ramapo 500 kV line. And crucially, the expectation is for the Champlain-Hudson Power Express HVDC line to come online in 2025.
HVDC. That's high voltage direct current.
Exactly. And that project is a potential game changer. It's designed to bring huge volumes of clean power directly into the city, bypassing a lot of the current grid limitations.
Okay, moving from the electrical grid to the medium that actually started the company.
Yeah.
Gas. Even though it's a smaller revenue driver, the gas system is equally immense.
The gas system is a reminder of Con Ed's founding purpose, and that system has also scaled dramatically. It consists of nearly 7,200 miles of pipes.
7,200 miles.
If you stretch that out, it would be enough pipe to run from New York to Paris and back again.
And that system serves a very specific geographic area within the metro zone.
Correct. Con Ed's gas service area covers Westchester County, the Bronx, Manhattan, and certain parts of Queens. But it's important to note the complexity of utility zoning in New York. National Grid USA handles gas service in Brooklyn, Staten Island, and the rest of Queens.
It's all chopped up based on historical mergers.
Exactly. Except for the Rockaway Peninsula, which is served by National Grid's Long Island operations, it's a real patchwork.
And the volume of gas flowing through Con Ed's system, that gives you a sense of the constant demand, especially for heating.
It really speaks to the continuous, massive energy requirement of the city. The average annual volume of gas traveling through Con Ed's system could fill the Empire State Building nearly 6,100 times.
Wow, that is a truly staggering metric.
It is.
All right, let's shift to the element that makes Con Ed globally unique, the New York City steam system. It's this almost forgotten marvel of urban engineering.
It is entirely unique. Con Ed operates the largest commercial district steam system in the world. And this system, it actually predates Con Ed's final corporate form. It began service in 1882 as the New York Steam Company.
And Con Ed acquired it later.
They acquired the system in 1954.
So what's the scope of this steam delivery today? Who uses it?
It provides high-pressure steam to nearly 1,600 commercial and residential establishments in Manhattan. It spans from Battery Park all the way up to 96th Street.
And the pipes are just running under the busiest streets in the world?
Roughly 105 miles of mains and service pipes, yes. And this isn't just hot water, this is superheated, industrial-grade steam.
How is it made?
It's supplied from 7 power plants, 5 in Manhattan, 1 in Queens, 1 in Brooklyn, plus they get some extra steam under contract from the Brooklyn Navy Yard. And to produce it, these plants boil water to an incredibly high temperature, 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
1,000 degrees. So this is not your home boiler.
Not at all. This is industrial-level thermal energy.
And the scale of production is incredible. The uses are central to iconic New York buildings.
The system produces 30 billion pounds of steam annually. And it's not just for heating in the winter, it's also used for cooling in the summer via absorption chillers.
Right.
It is the hidden power source for famous landmarks you'd recognize: the entire United Nations complex, the Empire State Building, and the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It is the unseen thermal backbone of Midtown and Lower Manhattan.
That massive physical system is now being updated for the digital age. Let's talk about the smart meter project and how they're trying to manage customer demand.
The smart meter project was an essential modernization. Con Ed partnered with the Clara Smart Grid Solutions, and they replaced over 5 million electric and gas meters.
5 million.
The bulk of that rollout was completed in 2022, but they still ran into, resistance and access issues, which stretched out the final completion.
And there was a specific temporary marker they used to keep track of this huge installation process.
Yes, a small detail, but it's indicative of the scale. To visually confirm that a contractor had replaced a meter, Con Ed used these lime green-colored seals on the electric meters. It just highlights the massive logistical coordination required to do something across millions of individual locations.
They're also actively preparing the grid for the huge increase in load that's coming from electric vehicles.
Managing that load is everything to prevent future blackouts. Con Ed set up a program, partnered with a company called Fleet Karma, that offered $500 rewards to EV owners in New York City and Westchester.
And the goal was to manage demand.
The program's design was entirely focused on demand management. They were incentivizing customers to charge their cars only when overall energy demand is traditionally low, overnight. That way you avoid straining the grid during peak hours.
We've established the scale of their distribution network. Now we really have to pivot to their history with energy generation, especially nuclear power, and this complicated path they're walking today with clean energy commitments.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you see, Con Ed's corporate journey is really defined by this evolving strategy, from being a monopoly generator and distributor to divesting entirely from high-risk generation assets to focus on the stability of regulated distribution.
Let's start with Indian Point. For many years, that was their biggest power plant.
It was a massive commitment to nuclear technology in the mid-20th century. Con acquired the land for the Indian Point nuclear plant in Buchanan, New York in 1954. The first reactor, Indian Point 1, went online in 1962.
But that first foray was pretty short-lived.
It was. IP1 only operated until October 1974. It was shut down because its emergency core cooling system failed to meet the rigorous new regulatory requirements that the Atomic Energy Commission imposed at the time.
And the cost to upgrade was just too high.
Prohibitive. So they just retired the reactor.
But they kept investing in the site, building more reactors.
They did. They built Indian Point 2 and Indian Point 3 in the 1970s. But the regulatory burden, plus rising costs and, public skepticism after the IP1 shutdown, led them to start divesting almost immediately. IP3 was sold to the New York Power Authority in 1975.
Yeah.
The final major divestment came after a steam generator leak in February 2000, which really heightened regulatory scrutiny. So Indian Point 2 was sold to Entergy in November of 2000.
So, by the year 2000, Con Ed is out of the nuclear generation business. This was a critical turning point for the company's identity.
It fundamentally reshaped them. With the sale of Indian Point 2, Consolidated Edison, Inc. transitioned from being an integrated utility-owning generation, transmission, and distribution to being primarily just an energy distributor.
And that shift allowed them to focus on the stable, regulated returns of the distribution business.
Exactly, rather than the higher capital risk and regulatory risk that comes with generation, especially nuclear generation.
This transition leads directly into the modern paradox we see in the sources.
Yeah.
Public commitments to clean energy, but at the same time, criticism for continued fossil fuel investment.
This is the most timely and complex part of their modern operation. On one hand, Con Ed made these significant public investments in renewables. They initially invested $3 billion in solar and wind projects.
Right.
Then, in 2017, they announced a plan to pour another $1.25 billion over 3 years into expanding their renewable energy production facilities.
And at its peak, that portfolio was pretty substantial. It certainly helped burnish their green credentials.
Their renewable portfolio reached over 1.5 gigawatts of operating capacity. And notably, 75% of that came from solar energy. At the time of that 2017 announcement, clean energy was contributing about 8% of the company's total earnings. They were positioning themselves as a utility that was actively transitioning.
But then, in a dramatic strategic reversal, They sold the whole thing off just recently.
The sources confirm it. A major divestiture in 2023. Con Edison sold its entire clean energy business to RWE.
So what does that move signal?
It signals a corporate decision to retrench, to focus back on the core, regulated utility businesses, Seaconny and Orange and Rockland, which offer guaranteed returns on infrastructure investment rather than navigating the less predictable, more competitive world of renewable power generation.
And while they were showcasing all these solar and wind projects, critics were pointing out that the company was still heavily committed to expanding its gas pipeline network.
This is the heart of the paradox. The Energy and Policy Institute, in a 2021 critique, pointed out that Con Ed was continuing to invest heavily in updating and expanding its gas infrastructure.
And they specifically called out unclean fracked gas.
Yes, methane gas produced by hydraulic fracturing. The criticism wasn't just that they used gas, but that these huge infrastructure investments lock the utility and its customers into decades of future fossil fuel use. It makes true decarbonization goals much, much harder to achieve.
If the company is making these public environmental commitments, how does that tension investing in both solar and fracked gas get reconciled internally?
Well, the external analysis suggests that the corporate incentives were misaligned with comprehensive climate goals. Critics found that while executive compensation policies did include renewable energy growth goals as a factor,
Right.
they did not reward executives specifically for reducing overall greenhouse gas emissions across their regulated gas and electric operations. The incentive was structured to reward asset growth, not necessarily environmental stewardship across the whole enterprise.
That paints a really complex picture of corporate mandates. But the reality is, when you run infrastructure this massive, the consequences of failure are catastrophic. Which brings us to the dark side of reliability.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because when a massive system fails, the failures are catastrophic and they're memorable. New York has experienced this over and over, and these incidents become part of the city's collective memory.
We have to start with the 1977 blackout. It's become a cultural touchstone.
That event was iconic for all the wrong reasons. The entire city of New York was blacked out overnight on July 13th and 14th, 1977. The only exception was the Rockaways, which, because of that split utility zoning, were powered by LALCO.
And it was all triggered by lightning.
A cascade failure. Several lightning strikes on substations led to a chain reaction failure of the critical interconnects that link the city's grid to outside power.
The 77 blackout was tied up with massive social unrest and looting. Decades later, on the exact anniversary, a failure happened again, though it was much more localized.
Yes, the 2019 Manhattan blackout. It happened on the evening of July 13th, affecting about 73,000 customers. This one was caused by a specific Consolidated Edison cable that burnt out in a transformer on West End Avenue.
It wasn't a citywide collapse, but the impact was huge.
That 3-hour outage paralyzed the cultural heart of the city. It shut down a huge part of the West Side, from the 40s up to 72nd Street. It closed subway stations, took out power in parts of Times Square, Rockefeller Center. It showed that even a very localized underground failure can bring the world's most dense urban environment to a dead stop.
Blackouts are one thing, but Con Ed's infrastructure has also been responsible for fatal, violent explosions, especially with those high-pressure steam and gas systems.
And these incidents carry a tragic human cost. We can start with the 1989 Gramercy Park steam explosion. A pipe rupture killed 3 people and injured 24.
And there was a major health concern afterward.
A damaged apartment building had to be evacuated, not just for structural damage, but because of extremely high levels of asbestos contamination that the explosion released into the air.
And the cause was directly linked to human error.
It was worker failure. The investigation cited the failure of personnel to properly drain water from the pipe section before turning the steam back on. This caused the pressure to build up and the pipe just ruptured.
And then the company made it worse.
They did. Compounding the tragedy, Con Ed later pleaded guilty to lying about the extent of the asbestos contamination, and they had to pay a $2 million fine. That combination of engineering failure, human error, and corporate dishonesty was just deeply damaging to their public trust.
And the incredible forces in that steam system led to another major disaster almost 2 decades later, in 2007.
That was the Midtown steam explosion right near Grand Central. An 83-year-old steam pipe failed. It caused 1 fatality and over 40 injuries.
What did the investigation find there?
Independent experts found the cause wasn't corrosion, but this rare phenomenon called a bubble collapse water hammer.
Can you explain the physics of a water hammer in this context? What does that even mean?
A water hammer happens when water suddenly stops or changes direction in a pipe. But in a steam system, it's different. It happens when a massive steam bubble suddenly collapses when it comes into contact with cooler water.
Okay.
When that bubble collapses, it creates a vacuum, and the water rushes into that void, slamming into the pipe walls with tremendous force. The experts figured that this momentary shock wave generated a force that was 7 times the pipe's normal operating pressure.
Just 7 times.
And it just instantly ruptured the pipe.
That sounds like a catastrophic, almost unpreventable engineering event tied to just the immense forces required to operate that unique steam system.
Precisely. It highlights the immense risk inherent in running a high-pressure, high-temperature system beneath a densely populated city. And the gas system has its own risks, as the 2014 East Harlem explosion showed.
That event, preceded by a reported gas leak, was absolutely devastating.
It was an unimaginable tragedy. On March 12, 2014, 2 apartment buildings just exploded. It killed 8 people and leveled the structures. It was a horrific reminder of the destructive power of compromised gas lines.
We also see deadly interactions between the electrical and gas systems underground, as noted in the 2009 incident.
This is a classic example of subterranean complexity leading to danger. In Queens in 2009, a fatal explosion happened while Con Ed personnel were actually on the scene investigating a problem.
What was the sequence of events?
A fault in an electrical feeder cable created a spark, which then ignited a leak in a nearby gas line inside a manhole. When a mechanic opened the manhole cover, introducing fresh oxygen, the accumulated gas ignited, causing the fatal blast.
Wow.
That incident was a direct catalyst for a major change in Con Ed's internal procedures for how they handle outside gas leak calls.
To a hidden failure that terrified the public? The issue of stray voltage. The electrocution of Jody Lane in 2004 was a truly shocking event.
The death of East Village resident Jody Lane and her dog in 2004 really brought the issue of stray voltage to the forefront. She stepped on an improperly insulated service box that was leaking high voltage current into the sidewalk. It exposed the systemic hidden risk in the city's aging electrical infrastructure.
What causes stray voltage in these boxes? Why is it such a problem in an old city like New York?
Stray voltage happens when the insulation on underground electrical lines degrades over time from water, age, or damage. The current then jumps to nearby metallic objects, lampposts, manhole covers, service boxes, and energizes them.
And after the fatality, they were forced to check everything.
Following the fatality and the regulatory mandate, Con Ed was required to test its equipment. During the next year, they found 1,214 instances of stray voltage that needed immediate repair.
1,214. That statistic alone must have forced a radical change in their maintenance procedures. The corner where she died was renamed Jody Lane Place in her honor.
It became a permanent, sobering reminder. And beyond these localized failures, the company's storm response, specifically during Hurricane Sandy in 2012, also drew intense public and regulatory criticism.
What was the main failure during Sandy?
The massive storm surge caused historic flooding across Lower Manhattan. This resulted in a dramatic transformer explosion at a Con Ed plant on the east side. It was captured on video, and it became this symbol of the storm's power.
And the response from their subsidiary was heavily criticized.
While the main company worked to restore the Manhattan grid, the subsidiary, Orange and Rockland Utilities, was heavily criticized for a slow and poor response in its territory. Some of their customers lost power for as long as 11 days.
Though in terms of communication, the company did show an adaptation to the modern digital age during that storm.
They did manage their public messaging well. Con Ed actively used platforms like Twitter to provide real-time updates on outages and restoration times. Their Twitter account gained an impressive 16,000 followers during the crisis, which just showed how essential utilities had become in spreading immediate digital crisis information.
Now, let's talk about a spectacular failure that caused widespread panic. The 2018 Astoria Borealis.
This incident captured the public imagination globally. On December 27, 2018, a transformer short-circuited at a Con Ed power plant in Astoria, Queens.
In the sight, that incredible blue glow illuminated the night sky. It looked like something out of a sci-fi movie. What was the scientific explanation for that?
The source of the light was intense arc flashes. When the transformer short-circuited, it created these powerful electrical arcs that vaporized metal and heated the surrounding gas into a plasma. That's what was emitting the light.
But why was it so big and visible?
Crucially, the specific meteorological conditions that night-low clouds and fog acted like a giant reflector and lens, amplifying the blue light and making it visible across the entire metropolitan area.
And the public reaction was immediate fear.
Absolutely. The sources track the panic. 911 calls spiked dramatically, rocketing from about 500 in the half hour before the event to over 3,200 in the 30 minutes after.
What was the actual impact?
The event temporarily shut down LaGuardia Airport until it switched to backup power, caused extensive delays on the #7 subway line, and a localized outage on Rikers Island. The sheer visual impact and the public fear are why it was so quickly nicknamed the Astoria Borealis.
Finally, let's touch on a more mundane but pervasive operational failure that causes daily headaches for New Yorkers. The infamous stop tag system for broken streetlights.
The stop tag is a classic bureaucratic failure point. A contractor assigns a stop tag when they can't repair a streetlight or a traffic signal because the problem isn't the light itself, it's a failure in the power supply to the unit. The problem is Con Ed's.
And historically, these repairs have taken an absurd amount of time.
The frustration comes from the fact that reports indicated these repairs could sometimes take over 2 years. That's because fixing the issue means tearing up busy city streets to replace failed underground wiring.
And the temporary fixes are an eyesore.
Right, the shunts. They're essentially these heavy-duty overhead extension cords left in place for months or years.
Did Con Ed make any commitments to fix this systemic delay?
Yes. In response to public and political pressure, Con Ed committed in 2017 to fixing at least 90% of these stop tag issues within a 90-day window. It was a recognition that slow utility response was impacting essential city infrastructure.
We've seen the sheer physical scale and the consequences of failure. Now let's turn to how a utility this magnitude is governed and held accountable.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we see the systemic challenge of policing a utility that is, by definition, an essential monopoly, especially when its operations are largely hidden underground, which gives it this unique power and anonymity.
Let's discuss the major black eye the company received. The bribery prosecution that came out of the cleanup of the 2007 Midtown steam pipe explosion.
This scandal, uncovered in 2009, was just a brazen display of corruption within management ranks. 11 Con Edison supervisors were arrested for demanding over $1 million in kickbacks, specifically related to the repair work after that fatal explosion.
How did the scheme work, and how did investigators prove it?
The supervisors were running a simple but effective scheme. They would approve payment for contract work that was either completely unnecessary or, in some cases, never even performed. And in return for faster payment on legitimate contracts, they demanded cash bribes.
And the FBI recorded them.
They successfully used undercover methods, including 2 retired Con Ed employees and a construction company president who wore recording devices to capture the suspects demanding the kickbacks.
So contractors were being shaken down while the company was trying to recover from a fatal system failure. What was the ultimate financial consequence for Con Ed?
Well, the company itself maintained they admitted no criminal wrongdoing, but the Public Service Commission, the PSC, took a very dim view of the lack of internal controls.
Right.
In April 2016, the PSC mandated that Con Ed pay over $171 million back to its customers. That compensation, which was about 1.5% of its annual revenue, was for the failure to supervise its employees.
That is a remarkable demonstration of how regulators can enforce corporate accountability, even when the company tries to distance itself from the actions of its employees.
It reinforces the principle that utilities operate under heightened scrutiny. And yet, despite these massive failures, fines, and scandals, the company has simultaneously received significant corporate honors and praise.
That strong juxtaposition is a persistent theme in the sources. What are some of those honors?
Con Ed has been repeatedly recognized for its stability and operational excellence. Fortune magazine named it one of America's most admired companies, even hitting second place on the top 10 list for electric and gas utilities in 2003.
And they've scored well in other metrics, too.
Highly in sustainability and diversity. They got top utility rankings in Newsweek's Green Rankings in 2014 and were recognized as a top employer by publications like Hispanic Network Magazine and Diversity Inc.
So a company recognized for stability and diversity on one hand, but facing sharp financial critique on the other. Let's get into the tax and lobbying criticism.
The critique by the nonpartisan group Public Campaign in 2011 was particularly pointed. It analyzed Con Ed's finances between 2008 and 2010. During that time, Con Ed reported huge profits, $4.2 billion.
And what was the issue?
The report noted that Con Ed spent $1.8 million on lobbying, while, astonishingly, receiving $127 million in tax rebates, meaning they paid zero federal income taxes.
How is it even possible for a company making billions in profit to get tax rebates?
This is where you have to understand utility finance. Utilities operate under unique tax codes because they make these massive long-term investments in capital infrastructure, pipes, cables, plants. These regulations often let utilities use things like accelerated depreciation or investment tax credits to immediately deduct those huge capital expenditures. So while it's legal and common in the industry, the criticism was directed at the optics and the timing.
And the optics were certainly made worse by the simultaneous hike in executive pay.
Absolutely. The critique highlighted that during the very period the company was getting $127 million in tax rebates, compensation for the top 5 executives increased by 82%, up to $17.4 million in 2010. The criticism was less about legality and more about the perceived moral failure of maximizing executive wealth while getting taxpayer subsidies and lobbying legislators.
Let's shift to a more physical and lasting legacy. The cultural footprint left by Con Ed's massive infrastructure, particularly the adaptive reuse of its old buildings.
The industrial nature of Con Ed's original assets means the buildings they occupy are often architecturally unique. They're built for heavy loads and massive equipment. When those industrial uses become obsolete, the buildings become candidates for really unique conversions.
What are some examples of these repurposed buildings?
One of the coolest cultural connections is a former Con Ed building on West 53rd Street in Manhattan. Because of its massive electrical capacity, its Edison history, it was later converted into the studio for the TV game show, Let's Make a Deal.
No way.
But most famously, it became a legendary recording studio called Power Station, drawing directly from its history. It was later renamed Avatar Studios, but went back to being Power Station in 2017.
That is a fantastic, fitting cultural irony. A power station that powers music.
Another example is the Excelsior Power Company building, a former substation in the financial district. Con Ed sold it in 1978. It was renovated into a residential apartment building and was eventually designated a New York City landmark in 2016. These buildings are like physical time capsules of the city's energy history.
Finally, let's acknowledge the unprecedented operational challenges Con Ed faced during the start of the COVID-19 pandemic.
The pandemic posed immediate, severe challenges to essential services. The sources document the human cost in 2020. 170 Con Edison employees tested positive for COVID-19, and tragically, 3 employees died. Utilities had to develop rapid protocols to keep the essential workforce operational.
And how did the company respond to its customers who were facing economic hardship?
Con Edison made a significant public pledge to help. They committed not to shut off service for electric, gas, or steam due to payment difficulties related to the pandemic. And they also waived any new late payment charges for all customers during that period, recognizing how critical utility access is during a national health emergency.
We journeyed from 1823 gas lamps tied to Tammany Hall, securing the single longest stock listing on the NYSE through the War of Currents, past a controversial nuclear history, and navigated massive blackouts, fatal steam explosions, and the incredible panicked light show of the Astoria Borealis. Con Ed isn't just a company. It is the physical circulatory system of New York, operating this unique global marvel that is the world's largest steam system right beneath the streets.
This raises an important question about the unseen machinery that underpins modern life. The sheer logistical and engineering effort to keep 93,000 miles of underground cable running reliably is just staggering. Yet, the sources demonstrate that the consequences of occasional failure, whether it's the localized tragedy of stray voltage, the systemic shock of grid collapse, or the moral failure of a multi-million-dollar bribery scandal, show the incredibly high stakes involved in maintaining such a complex, aging system beneath the world's most dense urban environment.
Our deep dive revealed a company trying to embrace clean energy with one hand, investing billions and touting its green profile, while continuously investing in gas infrastructure with the other, and then ultimately selling off its entire renewable generation fleet to focus on regulated returns.
Given the fundamental tension between Con Ed's historical investment in long-term gas infrastructure and the associated criticism that executive pay focused on asset growth rather than specific greenhouse gas emissions reduction, how do you think investor-owned utilities should best be incentivized or perhaps more forcefully regulated to achieve true comprehensive decarbonization across all of their massive operational areas without simply passing all of the capital risk directly onto the consumer? It's a challenge of balancing corporate fiduciary duty with a critical environmental mandate.